Welcome to Longevity Industries' presentation of The Destiny of Manufacturing. I am your host, Dean Phillips, and today with me, I am lucky enough to have Erin Riffle, who is from the Precision Metalforming Association's Educational Foundation. She is the lead for workforce development and Metalforming EDU. Welcome, Erin. How are you?
Hi, thanks so much for having me, Dean.
It's great to have you here today. I have to apologize. Full disclosure for our audience, I screwed up with the last podcast, so we're having to redo this again. So this is the second time Erin and I are speaking, although you'll only have heard this one.
This is the second time that I get to speak really passionately about workforce development and training for our industry, so I really don't mind.
Good. Well, speaking of that, pretend this is not the first time we talked, and let's say it is the first time we talked, and tell us a little bit about your background and about the Educational Foundation.
Sure. So I actually don't have a background in metal forming, but I came to Precision Metalforming Educational Foundation because I was interested in the nonprofit sector, and I was interested in fundraising, and I'm very passionate about education and training. So it seemed like a pretty natural fit for me to be working with PMA EF to help them meet their financial goals to help support projects that support workforce development and training in the industry. And so I started with the foundation, and as I realized that they were working on this really big initiative in conjunction with PMA, I realized that it might be a good thing for me to sort of shift the scope of what I was working on to really help scope and craft what's happening with Metalform EDU, which is a very large initiative to bring all of PMA's training materials out of the DVDs that they used to be in, and previous to that, the VHS format, into an online learning management platform, and to help really bring all of our metalforming specific training materials into an e-learning format so that they can be updated more regularly. The technology can be addressed. All the shifting needs of our industry training can really be honed.
That's great. Now, you mentioned about the new platform. How is this different from what we're used to? I think people think of the tapes and the training that we used to have, but this is much more than that. This is an entire program that has some flexibility to it, and also has a continuous journey feel, so that you're always working towards a bigger goal. Tell us how that's a little bit different.
Sure. Well, if you had either the VHS tapes or the DVD training materials, what you ended up having was sort of what I would consider a passive learning experience. You would put a tape in or a DVD in, and you would play it to, a room full of employees, new hires, or maybe some people that you were retraining or upskilling, and you would sort of have them watch this series of tapes, of a recorded experience about what it means to work in, specific areas of metalforming, and learn some specific tools, and by tools I mean sort of just learn the basics of operation, right? And then you would take maybe a paper test at the end, and then that would be sort of that, and then you'd have to go out on the floor and do the thing. So there wasn't really a feeling of this is an all-encompassing training experience. You just kind of sat down as a group, did a thing, and then went on about your business. And that might have been fine 15 years ago, but we're in a different working landscape now as it relates to just running our companies and bringing new people in. So now with Metalform EDU, first of all, this is an online learning platform. So basically, employees can train anywhere that there's internet access. So, you can do it from a smartphone, you can do it from a tablet, you can do it from a laptop, you can do it from a training room full of desktop computers. So there's a lot more flexibility, first of all, in the location of where training can happen, and second of all, in the time frame. So I know every company does training differently. So, but you have the opportunity to do that. But more importantly, I think the platform in Metalform EDU is individualized learning. So learners can actually learn at their own pace. We know that some people are better with maybe some, they can read words on a screen really quickly, or some people maybe not so much. So it helps that all of our modules now have an automatic voiceover that starts playing. And of course, you can turn that off. But for folks who are a little bit better with listening comprehension than maybe reading, that's a different way for that training information to be delivered to them. And additionally, every module of every course that we have has knowledge checks along the way to make sure that that learner is actually retaining the information that they're getting in each of these courses. And it has an assessment piece at the end of every module. So you're not looking at just like a final assessment of everything that you've learned. You're really looking at piece by piece along the way as you're building those knowledge blocks. Are your employees getting the foundational and fundamental skills they need to be able to go out on the floor, operate their equipment appropriately and safely and up to today's standards? So I think it's a really different approach to what we used to do, which was to sit people in a group in a room for a questionable amount of time, watch a video, and then hope for the best. So I think this is a much better approach to training.
It certainly sounds that way, and from some of the reviews and some of the feedback I've heard, it's working very well so far. So I'm keep my fingers crossed that it continues that way. Tell me, being involved with the workforce side of things too, what are some of the biggest challenges that you see out there now?
Well, I think we've got a lot of competition these days in general. I think that some people have this incorrect perception that manufacturing jobs are all going overseas. And you and I both know that manufacturing as a full sector is alive and well in the U.S. So I think there's that perception that we sort of have to counter. And I do think that we have a situation where maybe I would say maybe the last 20 years or so, the idea that every kid has to graduate from high school and go on to college and get a 4-year degree is something that everyone's been told that they should encourage their students, their children, but that's not necessarily true for everyone. And I think we've sort of lost the message that there are all kinds of careers out there where you don't have to sit in front of a desk, 8 to 10 to 12 hours a day, and that you can actually get out and do things with your hands. And sometimes those jobs also involve computers, but that can mean a whole range of things. And there's nothing wrong with going into a career path right out of high school even, when you're learning a trade, you're learning something that you're still going to be learning the rest of your career. So I think we've got a lot of perceptions around what it means to be to be educated and to have a solid career that maybe doesn't appeal to everyone. And I also think we're dealing with maybe an antiquated perception of safety, that all these jobs in metal forming are really dangerous and that you're in these really dark, uncomfortable places. And I mean, I've been on a lot of plant tours. I've seen a lot of people working in a lot of companies, and it is the direct opposite of that. I mean, there's definitely adherence to safety standards that are much better for employees in general. But I've seen, state-of-the-art facilities that are well lit, super operational, and there's no issues with those. So I think there's sort of an antiquated perception around what a career in metal forming or even in the whole manufacturing sector even means today. Yeah,
it's become quite different. I can certainly understand if you go walk through some of like Edison's facility up in West Orange, New Jersey, I believe it is. When you go through there and you see equipment and it was all tied to a flat leather belt and run off a line shaft, it can be pretty intimidating. And you look at it, it's like, wow, this is a scary environment. That, 50 plus years have passed since then, and the differences are quite drastic, with the push for more green. The lighting has changed and improved greatly in almost every single stamping plant and manufacturing facility. The the floors and everything are kept much better. They're cleaner. They're attempted to make it a sense of pride within these plants. When we started with 5S, now 6S, people started to make sure that cleaning was part of safety. It was part of improvement. It was an integrated system within that. And I think people have taken some pride in that, and such we have changed quite a bit in what we have. So
I agree. Well, I also think that, there's this big initiative every year to Factoring Day, where we encourage, and PMA of course encourages all of their member companies to offer plant tours to middle school and high school students, and to help bring folks into an environment so that they can help understand what it means to be part of this kind of a day. So I do think that as companies have a chance to understand that they can help craft this message, that we sort of joke about, this is not your father's manufacturing. I think the idea that I think people need to understand that what it means to be part of metal forming and what it means to be part of this sector is different now, and you need to experience that. So I think it's really important for companies to help change that perception by opening their doors, working with local schools, and even community and technical centers to sort of bring those potential audiences in so they can see what it looks like to work in a metal forming world today. And I think as we continue to do that, and organizations like PMA continue to help share the message of what it means to be part of our sector now, that perception is going to change for the better, I believe. But it does take a little bit of time, and when you're in this world where there are so many, we have competing choices, for our entertainment and for our careers. We live in a different sort of time now, and I think it's important for us to work, together to really help change that perception.
Yeah, and I think that you can say it's a knock on millennials, but one of the things that they definitely are doing is they want to know, they're more interested in, well, how is what I'm doing impacting the world? And
well, I think though, and I'm sorry to cut you off there, but I think it's not just millennials. I think that is an attitude that's sort of coming up the ranks in several generations. I know that there are folks in my generation who care about how the work that they're doing connects with the world that we live in today. And I think they want to know that maybe your company is making pieces and parts of something that you may not understand foundationally builds into something bigger. I think one cool thing some companies have done with Manufacturing Day, is they've said, okay, well, we make this part. Do you know what this part goes into, right? And just to understand what we build are literally the building blocks of building tools, useful tools, things that you enjoy using all the time, right? To know that a lot of our companies, they might be working on the pieces and parts that supply up to something like a Ford or a GM. And I think that sometimes, people forget that it takes human beings, working and running these machines day and night to create these pieces and parts that combine together to use something that's very useful in our day-to-day lives. And I think sometimes we're a little removed from that, and we forget that's one of the wonderful things about our sector. And to take it back to training, I think, it's also about helping the employees, the new hires that we're bringing in for all of our companies, see how they can, they can use this training, and they can help be part of something bigger. So I think that without, continuing to train our workforce, whether it's people who are new to the sector or people who are just being upskilled into a different role, everyone of every generation needs to understand what they're creating and why it matters.
Right. When you talk to a lot of the manufacturing companies, what are some of the feedback you hear of their struggles with recruitment and retention? What kind of things are you hearing back from them?
Well, it's interesting because it sort of ranges from things like there are some companies who have trouble recruiting or retaining employees because there's some sort of base foundation, just how to life skills that maybe people don't have in terms of understanding the importance of showing up to work on time, right? I know what some folks just don't understand that, many of our shops are production based, so there's really tight timelines, and we have to have people out on the floor producing, period. That has to get done. So just helping people understand the consistency and their own reliability as an employee. But also, I think sometimes employees need to understand how their employers, so our companies, how our companies are investing in them. And so it's really about developing a healthy relationship, which is why I think it's really key to do two things. One is have ongoing, education and training available from every company for their employees, but also to really help, employees and employers connect using the human resources function. Right? I have yet to meet a human resources manager who is, has extra hours in the day because they're always finding ways to help new employees or current employees understand how they fit in relation to the company, how the company values them. I do think it's really hard because one of the difficult things that we're running into is that everyone needs sort of an individualized retention plan as an employee. So the function of HR managers is also changing because they have to adapt to the fact that every person coming into their company has their own unique needs and their own unique situations. So, we can't rely on a one-size-fits-all model of training or retaining, right? So when we find potential employees who have an affinity or a knack for a certain element of the production environment, we really need to be in a place to encourage that, and employers have to be able to invest in their employees, which is again why I think things like Metalform EDU are so important. A lot of our training, we have definitely PMA specific, industry specific courses about metal forming, about press operations, die setter training, lockout, tagout, metal spinning, that sort of thing. But we have a lot of what they term soft skills. So things about communication, team management, time management, all these other things that sort of factor into what it means to be part of an innovative workforce. So I think there's unending challenges, but I think companies are taking on that responsibility of figuring out how to invest in their employees through training and then through other retention strategies. But it is increasingly complex.
Yeah, I don't relish the job of a HR manager today.
I don't know if you could pay me enough. I find HR managers to be they deal with things that I would never want the responsibility of in a million years. And I'm very impressed with, especially I think, we all feel the pressure sometimes of just trying to meet deadlines, and we're doing that, on the floor. We're doing that to meet our production goals and all of that. But for HR managers, they're really invested in success for every employee in a company, and I think they're kind of unsung heroes.
Yeah, especially since the turnover timeline for new hires is greatly reduced. People are coming and going much more than they used to. Then on top of it, you're asking them now to become great record keepers because you got to keep forms and notes and information for years now. And
well, right. And also, I think, there's so much more because, the sector as a whole has done a lot to make sure that they're maintaining safety and quality standards. There is a lot more documentation that comes around with that. And again, that's one of those things that's really helpful with programs like Metalform EDU, because every time an employee completes training, they get, sort of a certificate. It's time stamped, so HR managers are able to sort of keep track of what's going on with each employee, what things have they done that satisfy requirements of things like, OSHA and all of that. So I do think, it's been an adjustment in the sector to make sure that we're doing what we need to do to keep our employees safe, but also so that employers are able to say, like, we value our employees in all of these ways. And again, I think it goes back to what I hear is that, yes, the people are coming and going a lot. There maybe isn't the same level of what we think of as, you start with a company, you stay with them for 30 years. But I would actually argue that in our sector, we're in a position where that's what we want, and our companies want to bring employees in, but they want them to be there and keep gaining skills and be with them, for the entirety of their career. What I found, I saw a couple of months ago, I went out to one of our member company plants, and this was an automation tool and die, and the HR manager could point to person after person, and these were younger people, probably in their 20s and 30s, and she said, that person's getting married, that person just bought a house, that person's, getting married and going on their honeymoon, this is happening, this person just put their kids through college, this person has, their daughter wants to start, interning here in the summer. I mean, these are people who, it's really clear to me that company is investing in their employees for life. I mean, they want these people here, and they know, and they want the career that they have with their company to support the life they want to live. And so I feel like maybe some of our member companies, they're not spreading the word about how much they do want to support, people locally and keep them and retain them, So I think it goes back to talking about how important training is, how much our companies are investing in their employees by training them, by continuing to upskill them, by keeping them engaged and helping them see that these are careers. This isn't just a job that you come in and you work and you go home. This is a career track. This is a long-term life plan. And I really think our companies, that's what they want.
Yeah. You can talk to people about what are some of the most important things, and people sometimes say, is money important? Yeah, to some extent it always is, but the environment and the people you work for, how they treat you is one of the highest ranked things. That the reason why people leave, just because they didn't think their manager knew what they were doing, they didn't appreciate them, and it's those soft skills that are really, really important that people often overlook.
I agree.
As part of the EDU program, do we have things in that in there that focus on soft skills?
Yeah, there are. So I mentioned before that we have courses in things like, like team building and communication and time management. There's even courses on things like how do you, sort of like career building, like how to understand what it means to have a career in the metal forming industry and in the sector. Just understanding, I would say, one important thing is about how to actually be on time, right? So I mentioned time management a couple of times because those are some of those things that without understanding why it matters for an employee to show up on time day after day to come in and do that work, it's easy for them to think, oh, well, maybe I can just come in an hour later, I can stay 2 hours later. It doesn't work like that. So helping them see how they intersect in the bigger picture of how a company operates, right? So there's a couple of courses on economics, and they are also not only about how the finance of how a business operates, but how also personal budgeting, so that employees understand, just like you might approach your own personal budget, there's a parallel to what happens, in their company, so they can understand, again, how they interact and intersect in what makes their company successful. I know there are also, and again, this varies by company, but some companies have developed sort of, incentive and profit sharing opportunities for their employees as they're able to go in and do some of these, as you mentioned, the 5S, right, or now 6S. I'm talking about Lean Six Sigma and just helping employees understand how everything that they do, right, contributes to that bottom line. So Metalform EDU creates all these opportunities to help train employees and help them just understand how they fit in that broader context and how what they do or don't do, right, can impact a company for better or worse. I know there's this thing, and I've heard it from multiple people across our sector. They go, well, what if we train these people and then they leave? And I think, well, what if you don't train them and they stay? I think
Great point.
From an industry perspective, it's so important that we invest in everyone who comes in our doors, because that means that the bar for what we see as success will keep raising with our employees. And I really believe that employees want to stay. I don't know a single person who goes, man, I just can't wait to join a company and then leave in a year or two. I don't know a single person who goes on a job hunt looking to leave quickly. Most people I know are looking to invest in a place to stay there, and as long as they feel valued by their employer, they're going to find a way to stay. I think metal forming is a great industry for people to get into because there is that long-term potential.
Yeah, it is a very close-knit group, and it's something that I think once you get into it, you understand how everybody interacts and that everybody does kind of look out for each other and is working towards solutions. I've always felt that on any of the subcommittees or task groups that I've worked on in the past with the Precision Metalforming Association, that the goals there are the bigger picture things, and people come in from all different companies, competitive companies, and work towards, hey, how do we solve this problem? And I think that's really important, and it shows you that as a whole, our industry does concern itself with making things better, making the workplaces better. I
totally agree. I think one wonderful thing that's happening right now is we've been rolling out content at the sort of the basic press operator training, the basic die setter training, but our technical director, Peter Eulens, has been working on developing task forces of subject matter experts in a variety of areas. And, because we realize that we have this incredible boon of really talented, educated, longtime employees with a wealth of information and knowledge that we want to capture, right? And we want to be able to take that knowledge that we're afraid is going to be retiring, right? And we want to capture that. We want to put that in more of our training programs so that we are really helping to keep that knowledge inside our industry and in the sector. So, I really do believe that as we continue to develop content in Metalform EDU, we're going to be able to capture some of those really important things that you learn on the job, and we're going to be doing our best to ensure that knowledge gets passed on to all of the companies, all of the employees that are training inside of Metalform EDU. And I think that's one of the other things that's really important is that we are already in this sort of multi-generational workforce, but this is a great time to grab that knowledge and to really do everything we can to get it into the heads of the next generation, right? And again, we want those to be those long-term employees so that we're continuing to pass that knowledge down. And I also think that's why it's important that I know many companies are looking at working in partnership locally to help develop apprenticeship programs, to help train employees in actual skills, so we're talking about, apprentice tool and die makers and things like that, so that we can actually get that knowledge, into people's brains and get them that on-the-job training too, so that they're able to really hone their skills and to be able to, I really think it's more than skills. I mean, it's really like, it's a craft, it's an art. And I think that I'm hopeful. I'm very optimistic that, as we continue to develop this more advanced and specialized content in Metalform EDU, we're going to be able to build programs that will work for apprenticeship models, and that we will be able to keep people in our industry that way.
Great. Well, Erin, it's been great to have you here today. I do appreciate it. I'd like to thank our sponsors, the Precision Metalforming Association and the PMA's Educational Foundation, for sponsoring this podcast. I have been your host, Dean Phillips, and this has been the Destiny of Manufacturing podcast. Thank you very much. Everybody have a great day.